UPS today has announced they will be laying off 20,000 employees and closing over 70 facilities between now and June because of Donald Trump's tariffs.
I just got off the phone with the president about Amazon's announcement. This is a hostile and political act by Amazon.
American households are now paying up to $2,400 more per year due to rising prices on imported goods, much of it driven by new tariffs. This isn't just a statistic buried in an economic report. It's the difference between filling a prescription or skipping it. It's a higher grocery bill, a missed utility payment, Hishian, or a canceled Amazon order.
That if we end up having to pay more for shit, we will cut back more money in our pockets somewhere else. This ain't nothing but Game of Thrones shit.
On social media, frustrated consumers are asking the same question. On Reddit, people complain a lot about tariffs. According to CNN, the cost of imported goods from electronics and clothing to everyday household items has risen by 12 to 20% in just 6 months, largely due to the sweeping tariffs imposed by the Trump administration in early 2025. While the White House frames these measures as necessary to protect American industry, millions of consumers, especially working-class families, are beginning to feel like they're the ones being taxed for a conflict they never signed up for. As the cost of goods began to spike, Amazon found itself in an increasingly untenable position, squeezed between rising import tariffs and consumer backlash. To offset mounting costs, the company considered something bold, displaying the exact tariff amount on each product page, making it clear how much of the price hike was due to government policy. According to reporting from CNN and the New York Times in April 2025, this move sparked direct intervention from the White House.
By Amazon. Why didn't Amazon do this when the Biden administration hiked inflation to the highest?
President Trump personally called Amazon founder Jeff Bezos to protest, calling the move hostile and politically charged. From Amazon's perspective, the decision wasn't political. It was about transparency, letting customers know why the same item suddenly cost 20% more. Internally, executives saw it as a way to maintain trust with users during a volatile economic period. But from the government's viewpoint, this kind of visibility threatened to turn everyday shopping into a referendum on trade policy. Here lies the deeper tension. Amazon isn't trying to shape foreign policy, it's trying to survive it. With a business model built on low margins, fast fulfillment, and global supply chains, sudden cost shocks like 145% tariffs on Chinese goods make its system economically unsustainable. Passing the cost to customers risks brand damage. Absorbing it means profit erosion. Transparency in this context became both a business necessity and a political liability. This moment reveals a larger structural reality when policy impacts are immediate, visible, and measurable by the average consumer, when they appear right next to the buy now button. The boundaries between commerce and governance begin to blur. Amazon didn't pick a side in the trade war. But in trying to explain the consequences, it became part of the battlefield. While headlines focused on Amazon and the White House, the true front line of the tariff fallout wasn't in a boardroom or press briefing. It was in thousands of homes, garages, and small warehouses across the country. That's where millions of third-party sellers, small businesses, artisans, entrepreneurs rely on Amazon not just as a platform, but as a lifeline. According to Amazon's own 2024 SMB Impact Report, nearly 60% of all product listings on the site come from independent sellers, many of whom source inventory from international suppliers. When the Trump administration's tariffs hit imports from China, Vietnam, and the EU in April 2025, these sellers were left scrambling. Their margins evaporated, their supply chains fractured, and worst of all, they had no leverage neither with overseas factories nor with Amazon itself. One common workaround, raising prices to pass the cost to customers, often backfired. Sellers reported lower conversion rates, increased returns, and even algorithmic downgrades in search rankings. Others tried to switch suppliers domestically, only to find that US-based alternatives were either too expensive or simply didn't exist at the scale needed. The result: canceled storefronts, unsold inventory, and in many cases, total business shutdowns. Unlike Amazon's corporate leadership, these sellers couldn't call the White House. They couldn't negotiate policy. They were collateral casualties in a trade war they didn't start over, policies they couldn't control for outcomes they'll never benefit from. What's more troubling is the demographic reality. Many of these sellers operate in rural, suburban, or post-industrial regions, areas that have historically supported protectionist policies under the belief they would restore economic opportunity. Now, some of those same communities are seeing their most viable entrepreneurial paths online. Retail niche product lines, home-based logistics undercut by the very policies they supported. It's a bitter irony. Tariffs intended to protect American jobs are in practice disrupting the livelihoods of some of the most self-reliant American workers. When the Trump administration reintroduced sweeping tariffs in early 2025, the message was clear: this was about reclaiming American economic sovereignty. And at first, that message resonated. A 2024 Pew Research Center survey showed that over 70% of Americans supported Buy American initiatives, a bipartisan reflex shaped by decades of offshoring and community-level job losses. But support for tariffs, like most economic ideals, has a breaking point, and it's measured at the cash register. As import costs drove prices up 12 to 20%, another number began to matter more. Just 39% of Americans were still willing to pay significantly more for U.S.-made goods. And even among that group, tolerance diminished quickly once the effects moved beyond aspirational slogans and into daily essentials: groceries, school supplies, household goods. Amazon became the most visible flashpoint because it's not just a company, it's an economic mirror. With over 200 million Prime users in the U.S., Amazon isn't where people shop, it's how they live. So, when prices rose, deliveries slowed, and common items were tagged with import fees, the backlash wasn't just about shopping, it was about trust. Consumers began asking, wasn't this supposed to help us? This growing sentiment reflects a deeper psychological dynamic. Economic patriotism works until it collides with lived experience. When people were told tariffs would hurt China, but their own costs skyrocketed, the narrative fractured. They were promised jobs, fairness, and control. Instead, they got surprise fees in their checkout carts. These aren't just economic side effects, they're violations of expectation. The disconnect is particularly sharp in rural and post-industrial communities, which were both the strongest supporters of protectionist policies and the most exposed to their downstream effects. Many of these areas rely heavily on Amazon, not just for shopping, but as a source of home-based income and local business sales. When tariffs hit sellers, products disappeared. When logistics slowed, convenience evaporated. This shift in sentiment is subtle but consequential. It doesn't take the form of mass protests or loud political conversions. Instead, it's visible in shopping cart abandonments, customer service complaints, and a growing political agnosticism. For some, it's no longer clear which party or policy truly has their economic well-being in mind. Critically, this moment underscores a pattern long seen in American politics. People don't turn away from ideas because they stop believing in the principle. They turn away when the execution feels unfair or incoherent. Tariffs weren't rejected in theory. They were rejected in practice when the costs arrived at the doorstep and the promised benefits never did. When government policy affects wages or tax brackets, the impact can feel distant, abstract, even debatable. But when it reshapes the cost of toothpaste, pet food, and diapers on Amazon, the consequences become immediate and personal. And when neither the government nor the platform can fully explain or solve the problem, something deeper than frustration sets in. Trust begins to erode. In 2025, Amazon has become more than an online retailer. For millions of Americans, it is a lifeline for essentials, for convenience, for side income, and for access in places where retail options have vanished. And so, when the system falters, when prices spike due to policy and no one claims responsibility, users don't just blame inflation or international politics. They start to question the reliability of the system itself. This is the quiet crisis now unfolding beneath the surface of the tariff debate. The Trump administration argues that long-term protectionism is a necessary course correction, a path toward manufacturing revival. But for everyday Americans, especially those in the crosshairs of rising costs and shrinking access, the wait for long-term results feels like a luxury they can't afford. Their financial patience, like their supply chains, has limits. Meanwhile, Amazon, caught between profit pressures and political scrutiny, is left to balance transparency with damage control. By attempting to show customers exactly what portion of prices were tariff-driven, it challenged the boundaries of corporate neutrality. In response, the federal government blurred the lines between public accountability and political retribution. Two institutions with enormous influence on daily life. One private, one public, quietly drifted into a standoff while the average citizen absorbed the fallout. At its core, this moment is not just about trade policy or e-commerce pricing. It's about institutional trust in a system where the cost of everyday living becomes inseparable from geopolitical strategy. Consumers aren't just choosing between products anymore. They're navigating the unintended consequences of policy and platform decisions that neither asked for their input nor shielded them from the results. So now the question isn't just economic. If the government makes policy and the platforms raise prices, who exactly is protecting the public? And if trust continues to erode what fills the space left behind, the answer may not come in the next fiscal quarter or election cycle. But what's clear is this: in a country where every household holds purchasing power, the quiet choices of millions, where to shop, who to believe, and when to say enough could prove far more powerful than any tariff.